Hi, all. This is Jarrell Witty with 2020 Wealth Advisors. And today I have Kendalynn Mowery with Premier Trust on the call with us. And she's going to be going over the exciting topic of trusts. So, Kendalynn, if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm also going to share my screen, just have a presentation to run through as we go through this. So are you able to see that all right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Kendalynn Mowery. I am a business development officer at Premier Trust. We are based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, not because we like sunshine and casinos, but because Nevada is the best state to have your trust in. And we'll go into that in just a little bit. So we operate independently, but we are owned by Osaic. And because of that, we're able to give discounts to Osaic clients or those who have a financial professional that is with Osaic. So that is wonderful. So before we get into it a little bit, want to kind of set the stage. There's a few different ways that you can think about trust. Now, the most traditional way that we think about it is for generational wealth transfer. Maybe mom and dad want to leave money to their 3 kids, avoid probate. Which is awesome. The majority of our clients tend to use that kind of strategy. But then the other thing to think about is trusts are a great way to grow your assets or also retain them. So we'll get into all of that in a bit. But the first thing we're going to talk about is why a corporate trustee, right? That's the big question that we get asked, especially by families. You have this trust for generational wealth transfer. Why can't my brother or the oldest sibling be the trustee? And the big reason is that because trusts are extremely complicated. It's a lot more than an honor. It's a huge complex job. You need knowledge and expertise, as well as operational experience and accounting systems. And there's also an element of financial reporting and tax consequences. So even if your named trustee has the ability to do all of these things, they might not necessarily have the time. Closing an estate can take up to a few years. So as a grantor, if you have a trust, you really want to think about who you've named as your successor trustee. Do they have the capability to take on all of those jobs? And do they have the time? And then the other thing to consider is, do they want to? It's really hard for grieving relatives to also take on this huge burden.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to think about is personal bias. Unfortunately, money is one of those things that we just tend to fight about within our family. So the last thing you want to do is leave your money to the benefit of your kids and have that cause internal strife. The other thing is that we're regulated and audited. Now, that allows for more checks and balances. And then if you have a Nevada specific trust, a Nevada trustee is required by law. We'll go into what the Nevada specific trusts are here in a minute, but just something to keep in mind. So I'll tell you a little bit about who we are here at Premier Trust. We've been in business for over 22 years. That's a long time in the Nevada trust administration sphere, because in the late 90s is when the laws became very advantageous, and we were one of the early adopters. We have over 70 trust professionals and administer 6,500 trusts. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of our size, we have $2 billion in assets under administration. Now, the financial professionals out there might have their ears perk up at that fact. So assets under administration, not assets under management. Why is that? So Premier is structured a little bit differently than other trust companies. Other trust companies keep everything in-house, but in Premier, we truly believe in working in collaboration with the client's existing team. So their financial professionals, their attorneys, and their CPAs. We don't want to poach and we don't want to take over that business. So what that means is multiple people come together to work as a team. So we could do the administration, the financial professionals can do the investments, and the attorney can do the drafting. So we don't have assets under management, just assets under administration. Other trust companies may claim to be advisor friendly, but what they're not telling you is they're making a big chunk of their revenue by doing investments. So there's always a little bit of a risk of poaching. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of our size, our average trust is around $1 million and our minimum is $500,000. That can include a personal residence as long as there's not a really steep mortgage against it. I think one of the misconceptions is that trusts are only for the wealthy. Trusts are really for everyone, especially those who want to avoid probate. It's never a bad idea to put your assets in trust, and there's a wide range of trusts out there. We're going to go into the different types a little bit here in a minute, but the cost ranges vastly through those. You can get a typical revocable living trust for a couple $100, or you could create a very complex estate plan for up to 1,000. So no matter where you are on building your wealth and protecting it, where you are in your life, a trust is always going to be a good option. Another thing to note is we have a wonderful self-directed IRA program. So anytime you have one of those hard to custodian assets, like real estate, like mineral rights, you'll be able to put that here. Okay. So we'll go into a little bit of trust education now. So what's worth noting is that there's so many different types of trusts. I mean, it encompasses more than we just have on this list here today. There's lots of different ways to cut the cake, and the person who's going to be at the best position to make that decision is an estate planning attorney. Creating a trust is a little bit like baking a cake. There's so many different things that go into it. It's not just about your net worth or who your beneficiaries are or what your assets are. It's about all of those things and more. So we'll give you a little bit of an idea of the direction you might want to go in, but ultimately you will want to engage an estate planning attorney. Premier doesn't draft, we're only an administration company, so that's something to keep in mind. So with all the different types of trust, the things that you're going to ensure with all of them are probate avoidance, which allows for, a lot more secrecy if you don't want it out there, and then creditor protection, right? That's a big part of it too, and ensure that generational wealth transfer. It also is going to allow for asset protection for both the beneficiaries and the grantors. So one of the things we hear a lot when it comes to financial professionals and attorneys who choose to use Premier Trust again and again is our ability to take all different types of trusts. We have the knowledge, the expertise, and the staff needed to take everything. And because we've been around for 22 years, there's rarely a situation that we haven't seen or dealt with. So today we'll just go into what I call the star trusts. These are the things that we're most commonly seeing, kind of the trends lately with the economic conditions and what's been popular in recent years. So the first that we're going to go into are CRTs. Now, if you haven't figured out yet from this visual, we love our acronyms in this industry. So CRTs are charitable remainder trusts. These are charitable trusts in which the grantor can contribute highly appreciated assets to fund the trust, and in doing so, avoid capital gains tax. CRTs are also going to serve as great creditor protection for the beneficiaries. We're also seeing a lot of irrevocable life insurance trusts, aka ILITs. These ensure proceeds from a life insurance policy are freed from estate taxes. They provide long-term support for beneficiaries rather than one large lump sum. Because when you think about life insurance and what it is supposed to do for your beneficiaries if something were to happen to you, you don't want to give them that big lump sum and okay, go figure it out, especially if the beneficiaries are young or maybe not the most responsible. So putting your life insurance into an irrevocable life insurance really ensures that that money is going to do its duty in a way that you've intended it to do. We've also been seeing lately a lot of special needs trusts, SNTs, at the bottom of that list. These are increasingly common trusts established for a beneficiary with a disability or special needs, sometimes from birth and other times from a life event where a settlement took place. One of the key benefits of these trusts is the protection of supplemental security income and Medicaid benefits eligibility. Now, what really sets us apart at Premier is our Nevada charter. Like I mentioned earlier, we are headquartered in Las Vegas. We do have a satellite office up in Reno, but 70% of our beneficiaries don't even live in the state of Nevada. So to be clear, the grantor doesn't need to live here, nor do the beneficiaries, nor do the financial professionals, nor do the attorneys. Nevada trusts are for everyone and anyone can utilize them. How you do that is by having a Nevada trustee. You're essentially renting the jurisdiction through us, and you're going to be able to take advantage of the 5 pillars that we're going to speak about. Okay. So, what are the 5 pillars of the Nevada Advantage? The biggest thing that you're looking at is no state income tax. Now, to illustrate what that means, we'll use an example. So you have a trust and you fund it with whatever assets you want. Let's say you fund it with a brokerage account. Whatever the income is on that brokerage account, the grantor is not paying state income tax. That could be huge, especially for our families from higher income tax states like California. Oftentimes that savings alone is going to pay for our fees, if not save the grantor lots of money. The other thing that you're looking at with Nevada is the best asset protection laws in the US. Nevada has no exemption creditors. That includes divorcing spouses and alimony. Trust in Nevada can also last for 365 years. We call this dynasty planning. This is great for the grantors who are concerned about legacy, right? They want to leave it for generations. Nevada also has a pioneering decanting statute. Now, without getting too into the weeds on this, essentially how it works is you take an irrevocable trust and you pour it, right, like decanting, like wine, you pour it into a new trust. Similar provisions, same assets, almost always the same beneficiaries. Now, everyone has to be notified. You have to go through court. It's a big process, but it can be done. So this is really great for older trusts, maybe that were written in the 60s or 70s, left by grandma and grandpa, and the beneficiaries just feel like their hands are tied. They can't invest the way they want. They can't make distributions the way they want. The trust really isn't doing what it was intended to do. You take it to Nevada, you decant, you could pour it into something new and something that's usable for the family. The other thing you're looking at is the ability to divide duties among multiple trustees. That's really what we've based our business model on here at Premier, and it's very unique. I don't know of another company at this time that's doing it, where we truly don't do any investments and we're always going to work with a financial professional. Now, as a grantor, what does that mean for you? It means that long after you're gone, your trusted investment advisor is going to invest those funds in the way that you guys spoke about. So it's not going to go to a big trust where it gets invested in who knows what, or it's not going to go outright to your beneficiaries where they can maybe spend it recklessly. You really have the ability to control that from beyond the grave. Now let's do a little bit more trust education. We're going to talk about Nevada-specific trust. Now, just as a reminder, anyone can use Nevada-specific trust. Your attorney in any state can write a Nevada-specific trust. Some attorneys are more comfortable with it than others. If for some reason they don't feel comfortable, they could always work with a Nevada attorney and have them essentially check it or work in collaboration. So first, let's talk about what all of the Nevada-specific trusts have in common. They're all going to be irrevocable. They all have to have a third-party Nevada trustee, which is us in this case. They're all going to offer amazing creditor protection, state income tax savings, and the other pillars that we just spoke about. Now, there's two very important things to know. First, you only want to establish these when the skies are clear. Otherwise, it could be seen as a fraudulent transfer. And second, Nevada has a 24-month statutory waiting period, meaning that once the assets are put into the trust, they won't be fully protected from creditors until that 2-year period is up. A lot of other states have a longer period than that, but it's definitely one of those things you want to be proactive on. Okay, so we'll talk about the Nevada-specific trust. So if the trust we talked about before are star trusts, these can be considered superstar trusts. These are really what you're using to grow your wealth and to retain your wealth. They still will do the generational wealth transfer, but these are more of a strategy. So the first is the most basic, the Nevada Asset Protection Trust, the APT. This is what you're going to see most common. It's going to utilize all of those 5 pillars that we just spoke about: the tax savings, the asset protection, the ability to divide duties among multiple trustees. With these, you want to make sure that you're not funding it with more than 50% of your assets. That's the only guideline that you do have to look at. Now, getting more specific, the rest of these that we're going to talk about are all little variations on that asset protection trust. The first are names. So these are typically used for out-of-state clients who are getting ready to sell a business. We see a lot of these coming out of California. You can use a name to avoid state income tax on the sale of the business. These also use a distribution committee, meaning that any party can direct distributions. So this is great when the grantor still wants to have a lot of control over the assets or over the investments. So even though they are funding this irrevocable trust, they're going to be able to say who gets the distributions and when and for what. In this case, you're also able to use an investment committee or an investment advisor, meaning that the grantor or the financial professional has full discretion over how the investments are handled. The only things that we're not going to take are marijuana, because it's not federally legal, cryptocurrency, and any foreign assets that aren't held in a brokerage. So next are BDITs, otherwise known as Beneficiary Defective Inheritors Trust, which is quite a mouthful. So these are used to
Mhm.
freeze the asset value at a point in time. So essentially how this works is the client will sell the asset to the beat it and freeze the value at that time, and any future growth will not be included in the client's final estate. So these are for assets that are expected to dramatically increase in value. Gifting trust. Now, these are really important, especially for the financial professionals who may be listening to this. So gifting trusts are a great way to utilize the lifetime and annual exemption amounts without giving assets directly to the beneficiaries. So this is going to reduce the taxable estate at death. It's really imperative that we get clients to take advantage of this before 2025 because that annual exemption amount is about to change. Right now, it's sitting at about 12.3 million. No one knows quite sure what it's going to drop to yet. There's some talk of 5 million. There's some talk of it going as low as 3 million. Now, when you think about creating a trust, getting it drafted and working with the attorney, funding it with the assets, finding a trust company, it's going to conservatively take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So it's really imperative that you get your clients to start thinking about that annual exemption about now so they could take advantage of it before 2025 comes. The other thing kind of in relation to that is a SLAT. It also uses the annual exemption amounts. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. Let me reject that real quick. So with the SLATs, if it's structured properly, the assets and any future appreciation are going to be removed from both spouses' taxable estates. So one spouse will gift assets to the trust for the benefit of the other spouse, usually utilizing that federal exclusion. So these are the most common types of Nevada trusts. Again, talking with an estate planning attorney, is specifically a Nevada one, is really going to help you decide what's best for your client or what's best for yourself when it comes to building your wealth and really retaining it and helping to avoid some of those costly taxes. So who needs our services, right? We talked about earlier how trusts are for everyone, not just for the ultra wealthy. So you want to look at it from a few different angles. The first is that the clients that already have a trust, right? So the most common role we think of is the grantor, someone who wants to leave their money to future generations and the one who's funding the trust. In that case, whether you are the grantor or whether you're speaking to a grantor, the big question you want to ask yourself is, who is your successor trustee? Now, there's a lot of duties that come with it. That was one of the first things we spoke about. If you ever want a full list of what the duties of a successor trustee are, feel free to give us a call. We have a wonderful handout of it. A lot of the time, someone will say, oh, it's fine, my brother can do it. And then they'll read this big sheet and they'll start to think, ooh, maybe not. It's one of those things that we don't always realize how much goes into it. So the other role that your client may take or that you may take is being a beneficiary. So maybe money was left to you by your parents or your grandparents, and it's at another trust company. Now, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. You can always change your trustee, whether it's an individual or a big bank or another trust company. If you're not happy with the way your investments are being managed or the level of service that you're getting, you could absolutely change trust companies. How we start every process here at Premier is with a complimentary administrative review of the trust document. Whether it's just been drafted or it's been around for 30 years, we can take a look and we can see how the trustee can be changed to Premier, and then we're going to move the assets to your preferred financial professional into their AUM so it could be invested in the way you want. So for the clients, they're often saving a lot of money because we're industry leaders in price. They're getting their investments managed the way that they like, and they're receiving a higher level of service. To spring off of that and go down a road, our service level is a lot higher than other trust companies, and we've really structured it in a way where it's individualized. So our teams are a little bit like pyramids. At the top, we're going to have a trust officer. That trust officer has an extreme amount of knowledge and expertise in their field, and under them, there's a team of trust administrators. So when we have a new family that comes over to our firm, we're going to pair them with a trust officer and their team. We're going to look at it from a few different angles. The first thing we're going to look at is the client to trust officer ratio. We want to keep that really low. The other thing we're going to look at is pairing the family with a trust officer who specializes in their specific needs. So we have some trust officers that just focus on special needs trusts, others that just do irrevocable life insurance trusts, and some that do generational wealth transfer. The goal is that when the client calls our company, they don't go to a front desk or a call center. They have the trust officer's line directly, and they're able to form that relationship. We want to be able to pick up the phone and say, how was that vacation last week? Or we know you have this expense coming up and we already have everything prepared. It should be easy, it should be seamless, and it should be personal. The other thing to look at is for those who already have a trust is those who have been named as trustee. So maybe you've been named as a trustee on your brother's trust or your father's, and you are overwhelmed with the responsibility, or you just don't have the ability or the time to handle it. Call us, we're always happy to step in and help. Now, there's also those who need a trust, maybe those who don't have one yet. Financial professionals should be looking at their clients to help identify who needs a trust. The big question you're going to ask is, do you have an estate plan? If not, you should. Otherwise, you have the estate plan that your state has picked out for you, which is known as probate. So who needs a trust? You're looking at people who have gone through major life events. So birth, death, marriage, health concerns. And then from a business perspective, anyone who is getting ready to do a large investment, a sale, or a purchase. And then also those that just have a concern about wealth transfer or about preserving funds for future generations. Or those looking to direct a self-directed IRA, excuse me. So those are the big things that we're looking at. So let's talk about it a little bit from a financial professional angle. Why should you care about estate planning? Why should you care about trusts? The big three things that you're looking at are retain, grow, and compete. When it comes to retaining your clients, let's say mom and dad fund the trust, right? They put everything they have in it and it goes to the kids. What are the first things that those kids are going to do? They're going to liquidate the account, or they're going to move it to their preferred financial professional. By putting those funds into trust and making Premier the trustee, we can defer those investments back to you, and you maintain that generational wealth transfer because the funds stay in trust and you are tied to the trust. Therefore, you're not losing it as it moves through generations. The other thing you're looking at is growing. Many of your clients probably have trusts with other banks, with other trust companies. Someone else is managing those investments, not you, and you should be able to absorb them. And the third thing is competing. There is a huge generational wealth transfer happening in our country right now. Many people aren't talking about it and they're not being advised on it. By being able to talk to your clients, you're really just adding that into your service offerings. So we're going to go into some case studies, do a few examples. Maybe these will ring true with your personal experiences. Maybe you can think of a client who has a similar situation, kind of give you some examples of how most people utilize these types of things. Okay. So client one, Mia. So she's 30 years old, and most of her investments are managed by her financial professional. However, she is the beneficiary of a trust worth $700,000 that's held at another bank. So her goal is to remove and replace the current trustee. Maybe she's not happy with the service or the price or the way her investments are being managed. Most trust companies tend to invest like the client is 85 years old, and that just doesn't work for everyone. So what are the next steps? The first and always first step is to send the trust to Premier for a complimentary administrative review. We're going to identify what needs to happen to change the trustee over to us and change those investments over to the financial professional. We will work in collaboration with the client's estate planning attorney, and if they don't have one, we have some that we could recommend, and we're going to move it over to the FP's management. Now, when it comes to changing the trust, there's a few things that typically have to be done. The big one is a change of situs. It sounds big, it sounds complicated, it sounds scary. It's very easy. It's a one-page document. It typically costs less than a couple $100s to get drafted. And it's just changing the situs from whatever state the trust is currently held in to Nevada. That situs is the laws that apply to the trust. And there's really not a lot to be lost by doing that, only things to be gained. So if the client switches from whatever state they're in to Nevada, they're going to gain those 5 pillars of the Nevada advantage that we talked about. No state income tax, asset protection, the good stuff. Other than that, the only other document that we typically see when it comes to changing trustees is a removal and appointment document. Typically, it's done on the same page as the situs change. Again, it's not complicated, it's usually not costly, and we walk the client and the attorney through every single step. So the results is that the financial professional gains that money into their AUM. The client has integrated investments and lower fees more often than not. So client 2, James. So he's a widowed male aged 50 and a single father and has 2 million in AUM with his FP. His goal is really generational wealth transfer and taking care of his heir, making sure that she is provided for should anything happen to him in the present or in the future down the line. He also wants the FP to manage the trust assets for the benefit of his children. He trusts his FP, he's the confidant, he likes the way he invests, and he wants that to be maintained throughout the life. Sometimes we see this with, maybe grantors who know that their kids aren't that good with money or just don't have the capability to make the wise decisions, and they want to control from the clouds a little bit. Just make sure that everyone's taken care of once they're no longer here. So the next steps is that we would refer the clients to an estate planning attorney to get that revocable living trust drafted. We would do the review as always, and then everyone will sign the trust. When the client passes away, that financial professional is going to continue to manage the assets, and Premier will be able to direct the distributions and the administration. Now, when it comes to directing distributions, a lot of people have questions about that. What is that going to look like? So the beneficiary will call their trust officer, who at this point they have a personal relationship with, and say, hey, I need $5,000 for my college tuition this fall. What the trust officer is going to do behind the scenes on our side is they're going to build a case. They'll take the provisions out of the trust document that allow for that distribution. They'll take the client's request, and all of our distributions are going to go through our distribution committee. Those allow for checks and balances. All of our trust officers sit down, they look at the provisions in the trust, they look at the request, and they look at any other factors that they know about the beneficiary. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to think, does the beneficiary maybe have substance abuse problems? Is there a boyfriend or a wife trying to pull strings behind the curtain? We're not necessarily babysitters. We can't keep a very close eye on it, but we do like to consider all the other factors in the beneficiary's life. And then together as a committee, we'll make that decision on whether or not to give the distribution. I can tell you that we're very lenient with distributions here. We believe it's the beneficiary's money, and if they want to use it and it's within the terms of the trust, then they should have access for it. But as a fiduciary, we're always going to make sure we are noting that we are making those decisions as a collective. So the results in this case, got a little off track there, is that the financial professional is going to retain that AUM as it passes through the generations. And then the client is going to get peace of mind knowing that their beneficiary is taken care of. And then both the grantor and the beneficiary are going to have asset protection. So if after dad passes away, maybe the kids have some creditors out there, they're not going to be able to access the father's funds. And then also, more often than not, depending on how the trust is structured, you're going to be able to have tax savings. And then on top of that, you won't be paying income tax in Nevada on the growth of the assets. And then our final case is Linda. So she's a married female aged 40, and she owns and operates a successful medical practice. She has 5 million in AUM with her current financial professional. So Linda's goals is she wants to protect the assets from potential creditors, both for herself, but also for her beneficiaries. And she wants to reduce her state income taxes. So her next step would be to set up a Nevada Asset Protection Trust. We'll review it, everyone will sign it, and then we'll transfer those investments into the financial professional's AUM. As a result, the FP retains the AUM, and Linda gets that creditor protection and the income tax savings. So we went over a lot. It's a lot of information to digest, and we're always happy to talk at any point in the conversation. Whether the client is just starting out with estate planning and they want to know if a trust is right for them, the basics of it, what it looks like for them, what it will look like for their kids, or if the trust is already in place and are looking to hire a new trustee. The estate planning can be as simple as mom and dad trying to leave their house in a brokerage account to their kids, all the way to millionaires and billionaires trying to create strategies and structures to really help preserve that wealth, avoid taxes, and do asset protection. So, that's a lot to throw at you. So take down my information, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. We could talk more specifically about your clients' cases. Are there any questions at this time? Anything I could elaborate on further?
So yeah, I did have actually, I think a couple of questions. I'm trying to make there we go. I think I can make that a little bit bigger there. So we're both on here. So I had one question. So I work with a lot of clients, and a lot of them have trusts. And as a financial professional, I found a lot of times the clients really don't have any idea what's in the trust, and they're actually the ones that went to the attorneys to do it. So then when it comes to the kids, they really don't have any idea. So what are some common misconceptions that are out there with trusts, and are there, maybe some that they should have or shouldn't have, or?
Yeah, certainly. So the big thing from a grantor perspective, the grantor is the person who's setting up the trust, who's funding it, is a couple will go to an estate planning attorney and they'll set up their trust and think, okay, that's it. We did our job. Well, what you have to do is you have to fund the trust, right? It's only as good as the funding. So you want to make sure all of your assets are titled to the trust, your brokerage account, your home, it's all in the name of the trust. That's the big thing. And then from there, from a beneficiary's perspective, if you don't know what mom and dad funded it with, as a trust company, we're going to be able to find that information as we comb through the bank accounts and the house and the brokerage and all that good stuff. As an individual, it's always a good practice to keep a running list of everything you hold in your trust. When we work with clients, we send them a letter of acknowledgement to their home. You keep it with your personal records. And we're really able to help you navigate kind of that estate planning workbook, we call it, where you're writing everything down, you're keeping the cards, keeping the pamphlets and everything. So I think the big misconception is once you set up a trust, you're done, but you're not done. You need to fund it with your assets.
Okay. Yeah. And I've heard that happen many times, unfortunately. So what are some of the advantages of looking into a trust if someone has some assets, but they don't necessarily have one yet, and they're kind of debating should they get one or not?
Yeah. So the big thing that you're going to look at is, what's going to happen once you pass? Do you want your estate to go through probate, or do you want to make that transition seamless for your kids? And if you don't have kids and you want that all to go to a charity, how are you going to ensure that that's happening? So looking forward into the future with your estate plan. But it's better to do it sooner rather than later, because then you could take advantage of what your trust can do in the present. So that's the state income tax savings and the asset protection. Now, if you already live in a state that doesn't have state income tax, then, well, maybe you just want what we call a revocable living trust, which focuses only on generational wealth transfer. It's really going to depend on a few things. It's going to depend on the state that you live in, the state that your beneficiaries live in, what your assets are, and how close to, unfortunately, death. It's a little bit of a morbid topic, but as you get a little later in your life, you want to look at it from those angles. So really making that decision, taking all of those things into consideration. But what I always like to tell people is it's never too early to have a trust. And unfortunately, we never know what's going to happen. So it's better to estate plan in the present and have it set than to wait for something bad to happen and not have a plan in place.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned some different states. So you guys are located in Nevada. I'm in Ohio, and most of the trusts that I know of that I've looked at are either Ohio or Florida. So someone that would create a trust in the state of Ohio, their attorney would do it in the state of Ohio. Your company can then take those documents and convert it to the Nevada rules.
Yes, and that conversion is really easy. It's typically a one-page document that could be drafted by their attorney, or we have some attorneys that we could recommend. So it doesn't matter where your trust was written, we're always able to convert it.
Okay, very good. I had a question on service levels. So just to kind of recap that, I've worked in the bigger banks for years. Seems like you may refer somebody over to trust, and maybe a year down the road, you find out they're not doing what you thought they were going to be doing. And it's more due to service levels, whether it's they're, an 800 number and some city somewhere, and you're calling them up and they're just not replying back timely or things like that. So could you kind of talk about what, Premier Trust is a little bit different in working with you guys?
Yeah, definitely. It's really about creating that relationship with the trust officer, like we spoke about earlier, that personalized level of service. So, to speak to my experience, you have a trust officer who maybe has 100 clients. And of those 100 clients, maybe only 20% of them are really high touch, and that's strategic. You're pairing the clients with a trust officer who has the capacity to take them on. And the idea is that they know the family and they know the beneficiaries, and they also know the beneficiaries' spending habits and maybe the particulars about their life. That's going to really help when it comes to making distributions and doing it in a way that protects the grantor's wishes and then also is really useful for the beneficiaries. It's great because we love receiving Christmas cards here and graduation cards, knowing how the families are doing and feeling like we're really playing a key part in their family and in their life. It's one of those things where the grantor is leaving this money to his kids and to his grandkids because he wants that generational wealth transfer, but he also wants to know that his beneficiaries are going to get taken care of and with a level of service that you're just not finding at the big bank trust companies, because one trust officer will have thousands of clients and they're really just another number.
Yeah, that's great. So if someone was interested in learning more information and working with you or I, what is the best next steps forward?
Yeah, so the next step would be to call us. Our website is premiertrust.com. We're out of Nevada. My direct line is 702-673-6265. Feel free to give me a call anytime. What I always like to say is, we're not attorneys, we can't give legal advice, but we also aren't going to charge $600 an hour to have those beginning conversations. To answer the easy questions like, what is a trust and why do I want one? And what's that going to look like for my kids? And also to kind of steer you in the right direction of maybe knowing what type of estate planning attorney you want to seek out and the good questions to ask. We're also going to be able to do that review. So I would say whether you're a client or a financial professional, giving us a call is always the first step. And then based on your individual needs, we'll be able to direct you to the next one. More often than not, it's going to look like having a conversation with us, finding an estate planning attorney who works for you, getting that trust drafted, funding the trust, right? That's an important one.
Mhm.
And then choosing a trust company that really aligns with your goals, but also your values.
Okay, great. Well, I think we got all your information, and my information again is Jarrell Witty with 2020 Wealth Advisors. And on my side of the equation is I'm doing the investment management piece with this equation. And you can reach my office at 740-851-6289. So I know we're running out of time, so I really appreciate your time today, and I'll let you hop on to your next call.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.